it, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not gonna take this anymore! First, you've got to get mad. I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not gonna take this anymore! First, you've got to get mad. I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not gonna take this anymore!
My background comes from involvement in the dark occult. I was, as you said, a priest in the Church of Satan until I had an awakening in conscience and decided that this is really the institution, Satanism, dark occultism, that lies behind the diminishing human freedoms and the dynamic of that taking place in our world. These dark occultists have infiltrated just about every aspect of society and every one of our institutions, and they're really the ones who are calling the shots behind the seemingly enthroned political powers. Occultists really are behind their actions and their motives, and they work through hidden knowledge, which is what occult means. The word occult has a negative connotation in most people's minds, but it derives from the Latin language, from the verb occultare, which simply means to hide, to conceal, or to keep secret. And they are perpetuating the forms of control, of behavioral control, over the masses of people, because they have them under a form of mass mind control that works through the manipulation of people through hidden knowledge about the human psyche and how it functions, how it operates, and what people's motivations are deep in the psyche and deep in their subconscious. So with that knowledge, they wield a tremendous power differential. You know, with a differential in knowledge comes a differential in power. And that's how they're able to continue to keep people under their thumb and keep their actions in a very tight order of control, because people do not have the same knowledge that these occultists do, and they don't understand their methodologies of manipulation and how they work on a daily basis to basically manipulate them at a mental level and therefore control their actions. Even people within the freedom movement will say, oh, I don't want to look into Satanism, or I don't want to look into the dark occult. And I say, well, then you're doing yourself a great disservice, because you're not understanding the psychological aspects of your enemy that you are actually in a war against. Whether you want to look at it in that way, that this is a war or it's just an evolutionary progression, regardless, you're not looking at the psychological factors that are taking place in the minds of the people who are attempting to hold back human evolutionary progress. Without understanding that, it's like trying to play a chess game against an opponent that you know nothing about, you know nothing about his strategies, and therefore you're going to be at a disadvantage. Yeah. So we look at both the positive aspects of human consciousness, and we need to look at the negative. We need to understand the methods of control, the methods of mind control, and the ideologies that these people believe in, and in a flawed way and in a fearful worldview way. But nonetheless, it's important to understand. I mean, you know, that's their worldview. We have to understand that's the perspective that they're coming from. They're seeing the world in this way, and they're acting upon that worldview. That's not negative to look at that in an attempt to understand it, because once we understand it, then we're in a position to do something about it.
The controllers behind the scenes are the ones that believe in it. It doesn't matter whether or not these people, you know, the mass general public or any of us really believe that these people worship Satan or Lucifer.
You don't need to believe in the concepts or ideas that are being discussed to understand that a group of people out there does deeply believe in these things and is willing to act upon them. So the idea that people will often come up with is, oh, I don't want to hear any of that stuff about the occult. I don't believe in that. Is that notion is completely irrelevant, because there are other people in the world who do deeply believe in these things and are acting on them. But ultimately, what's going on at a higher level is this is an agenda regarding the destruction of consciousness, care, and the infusion of negative energy into the field of consciousness that's all around us.
You know, it's pretty scary, pretty sick stuff. And look at her wearing her upside down cross on this jacket and on this t-shirt with the upside down cross that says mind control upside down. And the reason for the upside down cross, that's a mockery of Jesus Christ. Satanists do everything opposite what the Bible says to do. And look at the satanic altar, and you see that upside down cross, same thing. You see the connection right there. At Mickey Mouse and his wizard's hat, and you'll notice the star and the moon on the hat. And that's always on the hats of wizards. And where is that derived from? That's from Baphomet. Take a look at the star on his forehead and the moon right over his right shoulder. And take a look at the infamous Satanist Marilyn Manson and his connection to Disneyland and Mickey Mouse. And like I always say, it's about connecting the dots. And take a look at some of the elite of Hollywood in the past, from the very beginning, with Sammy Davis Jr., a well-known Satanist connected to Anton LaVey, the founder of the Satanic Church. And also take a look at all these Hollywood stars. The name Hollywood stars, where is that derived from? Well, Satan was a falling star. So when you hear the name of a Hollywood star, they're like little gods. That's what it's all about. That's what Satanism's all about, being your own God. You know, and rejecting Jesus and God. And take a look at pharmacy and pharmaceuticals Also, it's all about witchcraft in the Greek meaning. Like it says right here with pharmaceuticals and pharmacy. Like I always say, it's about connecting the dots and the satanic connection in Hollywood and the music industry.
I know you consider yourself a Catholic, but what happens when you worship Moloch at the Bohemian Grove? New York Post says that male prostitutes are shipped into the Bohemian Grove. Can you tell us what happens there?
Can I get a quick autograph here? What's this picture of?
Actually don't remember.
See you at the Bohemian Grove. Okay. You told me that I'm delusional.
You know, it's nice to know that there's some people who have fantasy lives that have nothing to touch with. Nice to have you. Bye-bye.
So you were there. Can we talk to you about it, sir?
Yep. No questions at all?
Comment on Obama's move on immigration?
Any questions, any answers on the Bohemian Grove? You never want to talk to me about it. I'm not going to stop asking the question.
Who do you think that might be a good person to consider for VP?
When are you going to open up on the Bohemian Grove?
Bye-bye.
You might as well just answer the question. It's going to be a lot easier. People are just going to, it's going to be on YouTube. People are just going to speculate that there's something wrong unless you tell us there's nothing wrong.
Come on.
Come on.
Murderous Zionist piece of shit. You won't get your New World Order, guy. I can't, are you happy for the millions of deaths you're part of? People know. People are waking up to the reality of this, Mr. Bush, you piece of shit.
Listen, that's unnecessary.
No, it is not unnecessary. The guy is responsible for killing millions. If you knew anything about real history, fuck you!
Fuck you. In hindsight, I thought maybe I should have brought up the Franklin cover-up and his gay pedophile tendencies, or Iran-Contra and his drug running, or his involvement in occult rituals at the Bohemian Grove, or his theft along with the Clintons of millions of dollars through the Bush-Clinton-Katrina Fund, or his relations with the Bin Ladens, or his calls for a new world order. The list goes on and on for anyone educated with real history. Even though I did not mention any specific crimes, and I basically just cursed out the old diabolical psychopath, I'm glad I did it.
And it's widespread?
Oh, yeah. I was surrounded by them when I was 14 years old. Surrounded. Literally. Didn't even know it. It wasn't until I was old enough to realize what they were and what they wanted and what they were about and the types of people that were surrounding me till I went, oh my God, they were everywhere like vultures. There was a circle of older men that surrounded themselves around this group of kids. And they all had either their own power or connections to great power in the entertainment industry.
She's beautiful. What's her name?
Marley. Her name was Marley.
It's a beautiful name.
Yeah, we named her after Bob Marley. He had this idea, it was kind of a virologist's idea. He believed that you could cure racism and hate, literally cure it, by injecting music and love into people's lives. One day he was scheduled to perform at a peace rally. Gunmen came to his house and shot him down. 2 days later, he walked out on that stage and sang. Somebody asked him why. He said, the people who are trying to make this world worse are not taking a day off. How can I? Light up the darkness.
Don't let them fool you. Or even try to school you. Oh no. Don't let them change you. Or even rearrange you.
When he told me that he was at that industry event and came in contact with A$AP Rocky, I knew exactly what he was getting ready to talk about next. I've noticed that within their videos, there was a ton of occult symbology. these guys playing with Bibles, standing inside of Baphomets. The clothing line that they're wearing has the compass and square. It's called Black Label and has Baphomets on it. These guys fully are promoting the occult. And ladies and gentlemen, this is not the only group that is guilty for using a high amount of occult symbology within their videos. What's going on right now within the entertainment industry and media at large, period, is the fulfilling of Alice Bailey's stratagem to make all of the arts occultic, music, poetry, arts, etc., to make them immoral, occultic, obscene, all of these things. It is a part of the New Age movement's agenda to establish a one world government system under which Lucifer will be acknowledged as sovereign. Why? Because our minds will be already acclimated to receiving these demonic suggestions as something that is good, because we have enjoyed it in our music, we've enjoyed it in our television programs, our cartoons, our video games, and in our clothing. ASAP is a new group that is just blowing up the same way that Odd Future blew up, the same way that Lady Gaga blew up, and every other artist that is jumping in the industry right now that is making sure that within their videos, on the clothing that they're wearing, they are throwing out occult symbols all over the place and connected with those occult symbols within their music, though they may not make a conscious decision to do this, but because they've become ready agents of the devil, because they have submitted their hearts not to Jesus Christ, but to the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eye, and the pride of life. The very principles contained within their music are the very principles that are connected to the symbols that are being promoted from the occult. Ladies and gentlemen, that's what's transpiring. Going back to the story, my entertainment insider was at this event, came in contact with A$AP Rocky, and was impressed because this group came up out of Harlem, New York, came up out of nothing, and just recently they got $1 million deal. I wasn't surprised because I saw that they were connecting themselves with the occult. So that is always going to be the direct result of that type of activity. A$AP Rocky, Lady Gaga, Kanye West, Tyler the Creator, and Odd Future, Wolfgang Kill Them All these guys, they're just examples of what's going on a broad scale with the entire media industry at large. Why? Because it is the agency, the platform by which the devil can reach the masses in the shortest period of time, and you're falling for this garbage, hook, line, and sinker. It's time to make a clear decision. The New Age agenda is being fulfilled. It's being carried out, and it will be carried out to the T. The question is, are you going to be one of the people that fall for the deception?
I can't go back, can I?
No. But if you could, would you really want to? I didn't say it would be easy. I just said it would be the truth.
You ever have that feeling where you're not sure if you're awake or still dreaming?
I know exactly what you mean. You have the look of a man who accepts what he sees because he is expecting to wake up. Ironically, this is not far from the truth.
On this video, I want to deal with the music industry, or what I like to call the wicked music industry. Now, my main focus is going to be on the industry as a whole, but I'll use a few key people to bring out certain facts. I'm going to deal with Michael Jackson and what really happened to him. I'm going to deal with Beyonce and Rihanna and show you what they're really about. And on a smaller scale, I'll deal with some other artists as well. So let's start with Michael Jackson. I want to go back to the end of his life first and break down what really happened to Mike. We'll begin with a speech that he gave in London, where he deals with the music industry and his record label.
You know, let me just say this. The tradition of great performers from, and I really want you to hear what I have to say, the tradition of great performers from Sammy Davis Jr. to James Brown to Jackie Wilson. The story is usually the same though, you know, these guys work really hard at their craft, but the story ends the same. They usually are broken, torn, and usually just sad, and the story is very sad in the end, because the companies take advantage of them. They really do. And, you know, being the artist that I am, at Sony, I've generated several $1 billion for Sony. Several billion. And they really thought that my mind is always on music and dancing, and it usually is, but they never thought that this performer, myself, would outthink them. Yeah! So, we can't let them get away with what they're trying to do, because now I'm a free agent. Yeah. I just owe Sony one more album. It's just a box set, really. I can do the box set, just give them any 2 songs. So I'm leaving Sony a free agent, owning half of Sony. So I own half of Sony's publishing, and I'm leaving them, and they're very angry at me because of it. But I just did good business, you know. So the way they get revenge is to try and destroy my album.
Okay, let me explain this. Basically, what Mike is saying is this. Under his contract, he only had to do one more album, and then he would be out of his contract with Sony, and he was going to leave Sony owning half the company. Now, Sony didn't like that, so when he made his album called Invincible, Sony didn't promote it, and they did everything they could do to make sure it didn't sell, as a way to get back at Mike for wanting to leave. Now, you got to understand, Michael Jackson had a 30-year relationship with Sony. He made them a lot of money. He said, I generated several $1 billion. So Sony wasn't going to let Mike just walk away scot-free. They had to do something. All right, let's go back to the speech.
Thank you. I love Unbreakable. You know, and Tommy Mottola is a devil.
See, during the end of his life, Michael Jackson started to speak out against the things that was going on in the music industry. But it was much more than him just trying to get out of a record contract. Mike was involved in something much bigger than that, and he was frustrated with the situation he was in. So out of frustration, he called Tommy Mottola a devil.
And Tommy Mottola is a devil.
Now, Tommy Mottola was the head of Sony Music at that time. And Michael Jackson and Tommy Mottola didn't get along at all, because Mike knew that he was only being used by Tommy Mottola. Mike was tired of being a slave, and he wanted his freedom. Now, Michael's father, Joe Jackson, got Michael and his brothers into the music industry when they were young kids. But Michael was always the standout star, so the Illuminati came after him. They knew he would be the one to bring in the big money. So they told little Mike everything he wanted to hear, and they promised him the whole world. All he had to do to get it was sign his life away and sell his soul to the devil. See, in order to reach superstardom on this earth, you gotta sell out. Why? Because the scriptures tell you that the earth is given into the hand of the wicked. That's why the Bible says, love not the world, neither the things in the world. If any man love the world, the love of the Father is not in him. Now, why does it say that? Because the people who rule this world are wicked. And if you want to live like they live, you have to become wicked and do what they tell you to do. This is nothing new. Satan tried to use this same trick on Christ. Let's read it. That's Matthew 4, 8 and 9. Verse 8. Again, the devil taketh him up into an exceeding high mountain, and showeth him all the kingdoms of the world, and the glory of them, and saith unto him, all these things will I give thee, if thou wilt fall down and worship me. See, that's what the music industry is all about. They offer you the good life, fame, fortune, and everything you desire, but in return, you gotta sell them your soul. This is not make-believe. This stuff is really happening in the music industry. Let me show you what Kanye West said at one of his concerts.
I sold my soul to the devil. I know it's a crappy deal. Lisa came with a few toys like a Happy Meal. I'm spaced out, dog. I be on that moon talk. I wonder if God asked Mike how to moonwalk.
He said, I sold my soul to the devil. I know it's a crappy deal. Lisa came with a few toys like a Happy Meal. Then he made a reference to God talking to Michael Jackson. But let me replay that first part one more time so that you can hear him clearly say it again.
I sold my soul to the devil. I sold my soul to the devil.
Kanye West didn't just say that to be creative. He really sold his soul to the devil. You have to sell your soul to get to the level where he is. You got to do what they tell you to do. You got to act like they tell you to act. You got to dress like they tell you to dress because they own you. They become your God and you have to worship them. And when I say they and them, I'm talking about the Illuminati, the people who run the music industry, the people who run the whole entertainment industry for that matter. These people are Satan worshipers. They are directly connected to the devil, and by selling out to them, you automatically sell out to the devil. And that's why Michael Jackson called Tommy Mottola a devil.
And Tommy Mottola is a devil.
See, Michael Jackson grew up in the music industry, and he knew what it was all about. He sold his soul to the devil a long time ago. Now, most people will look at this picture and see a young boy making the OK sign with his hand. But this is not the OK sign. This is a satanic hand symbol that represents 666, the seal of Satan. The circle in the first finger is 16. The circle in the second finger is another 6. The circle in the last finger is another 6. So when you put them all together, you get 666. Like I said, Michael Jackson grew up in the music industry. He's been involved with the Illuminati since he was young. Now, if you don't believe this hand sign means anything, take a look at these other celebrities and see what they're doing in these pictures. Here you see Beyonce, a top-level witch, and we're going to deal with her next. But here you see Beyonce flashing the 666. Here's Drake, 666 over one eye. Neo, 666. Shakira, 666. Justin Timberlake, 666 over one eye. T-Pain, 666. Lil Wayne, 666 over one eye. Now look at this next one. This is Lady Gaga. Look at her right hand, 666. But notice the symbol that's in front of her. It's a pyramid with an eye inside of it. That eye is the eye of Horus. Now, Horus was one of the main gods that the Egyptians worshipped. That's why when you see this eye, you often see a pyramid with it, as you see here. This pyramid with the eye inside is the same symbol that Jay-Z always puts up. It's also the same symbol that's on the back of the dollar bill, because that's what this is all about, selling your soul to the devil just to make a dollar. Back in the day, Method Man said it best in the song.
Cash rules everything around me. Cream, get the money. Dollar, dollar bill, yo. Cash rules everything around me. Cream, get the money. Dollar, dollar bill, yo.
See, that's the mentality of these people. In the music industry, it's all about making money. Cash rules everything. All they think about is making money. These so-called celebrities are willing to do anything to be rich. Let's see what the scriptures say about that. Mark 8:36. For what shall it profit a man if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? And that's what they do. They sell their soul to gain the world.
The goal is to be famous, then you're going to do a lot to get there, like sign your name in blood in a contract with the devil. Like you're going to end up on a one-way street and it's going nowhere. Like that's just the truth. I've seen so many people like forsake their moral code and their value systems just for a little bit of fame, and it's not worth it at the end of the day. It's really not worth it.
You must remember, Michael told me repeatedly that they were going to kill him, that he was going to die.
And who did it?
Let's look at one more. This is 1 Timothy 6:10. For the love of money is the root of all evil, which while some coveted after, they have erred from the faith and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. So you got people so caught up in chasing money because they love it so much that they destroyed themselves in the process. Yeah, now they got money, now they rich, but they serve Satan. And it also said they pierced themselves through with many sorrows. Because you got people who got everything there is to have in the world, but they're miserable because they have no type of connection with the Most High. And that's part of what happened with Michael Jackson. He was spiritually lost. See, Mike knew all about the satanic movement in the music industry because he was a part of it, but he was getting tired of it. He wanted to get out of that part of the business a long time ago, but it ain't that easy once you get in. Mike even sung about being trapped in one of his songs called You Can't Win from the movie The Wiz. Listen closely to these lyrics.
And syncopate. You can't win. You can't make even, and you can't get out of the game. People keep saying things are gonna change. They look just like they're staying the same. You get yourself to blame. You can win time, can't break even, can't get out of the game.
Now in that song, he also said you can't break even, but he tried to leave Sony at least owning half of it.
So I'm leaving Sony a free agent, owning half of Sony.
Michael Jackson was frustrated, and he got ahead of himself. He got cocky, and he started to openly speak out against the Illuminati. He called Tommy Mottola a devil on national TV.
What's wrong with sharing your bed? I didn't say I slept in the bed. Even if I did sleep in the bed, it's okay. I am not going to do anything sexual to a child. It's not where my heart is. I would slit my wrist first. I would never do anything like that. That's not Michael Jackson. I'm sorry. That's someone else. That's someone else.
As God has shown us by turning stones to bread. Has God turned stones to bread? That's a lie. In fact, that's a quote of Satan right out of the Bible. Because the scriptures say, Satan said, turn these stones to bread.
said the supposed spirits of the dead that you're talking with are demon spirits. They're fallen angels. They're beautiful beings.
Just set it out, just like
Oh,
that.
yeah. Because it gives the demon spirits an opportunity to impersonate the dead. She said her voice went through me. The power.
That's someone else. That's someone else.
And Tommy Mottola is a devil.
Michael Jackson decided he was going to get out that deal no matter what. And the results of that decision were tragic.
Michael Jackson was murdered. That claim comes from his sister LaToya, seen here waving to fans from a car in Los Angeles. She says the King of Pop was effectively killed for his money. In interviews with Sunday newspapers, she says she believes her brother was surrounded by a manipulative entourage who fed him drugs and saw him as a cash cow. This so-called bad circle is said to have forced him to sign up for 50 concerts at London's O2 Arena, when in fact he only wanted to do 10. LaToya's also spoken of the moment when she found out about Michael Jackson's death. She was told to get to the UCLA Medical Center, but before she could, her mother was on the phone screaming, "He's dead."
Michael Jackson was murdered because he was no longer cooperating with the system. Now, the Illuminati knew that Michael Jackson was the cash cow of the family, so they came to the Jackson family and made them an offer they couldn't refuse. They took the offer. The Jackson family, with the exception of Michael's mother and his sister LaToya, sacrificed Michael Jackson's life to Baphomet as a way to keep the money coming in. After all, Michael was worth more dead than he was alive. Here you see a chart of Michael Jackson's record sales from 2001 to 2009. Now, he was doing okay between 2001 and 2008. But after he died on June 25, 2009, Michael Jackson sold 31 million records worldwide in less than a year. That's unheard of. Oh, and remember I said that the Illuminati offered the Jackson family a deal they couldn't refuse? Well, Sony signed a deal after Michael Jackson died with his estate worth $250 million. Now combine that with the money from the 31 million albums sold, and you have a ridiculous amount of money being made. And guess who's getting all that money? You got it, the Jackson family. His family sacrificed him to Baphomet to get that money, and even after Mike died, Sony is still making money off of him through that deal. Now you understand why Mike went from looking like this to this. Mike was taking care of his whole family. He had people around him that was only using him. He had demons plaguing him. He had stress on a whole nother level. But that's what happens when you sell your soul. The scriptures say you reap what you sow. Now this demon on the screen is named Baphomet. He's the demon that these celebrities pray to and seek power from. He's the demon that's set up over the music industry. Celebrities actually do human sacrifices to this demon for power, fame, and riches. Now, if you don't believe what I'm saying, in your free time, get on the internet and do some research into the Illuminati and the death of Aaliyah, Kanye West's mother, Jennifer Hudson's family, Michael Jackson, and many, many others. All these people were sacrificed to Baphomet to further the career of other entertainers. Now, I know what the official news stories say, but ask the Most High for guidance and do your own research and see what you come up with. Now, the music industry is wicked because it was set up by Satan to put people into idol worship. Look at how they put it right in our faces. Now that was the American Idol intro. Let's see what the definition of an idol is. Idol, an image or other material object representing a deity, which is a god, to which religious worship is addressed. So an idol can be a person, a picture, or anything that's looked at as a god and worshipped. So when you say things like, he's my idol, or she's my idol, you're actually saying that person is your god. That's why they named the show American Idol. See, these celebrities are nothing but idols, being worshipped by people all around the world. Look at this picture of a Christian worship concert. Now look at this picture of a Jay-Z concert. What's the difference? Notice how they have their hands lifted up, giving praise to Jay-Z? It's no coincidence that he calls himself Hova, which is short for Jehovah, which is God's name in modern Hebrew. Jay-Z knows that he's being worshipped because he sold his soul to be in that seat. But almost everybody knows that Jay-Z is a Freemason Illuminati member. So I want to deal with his wife, Beyonce. Now, the same way that Michael Jackson was the standout star from the rest of his brothers, you had the same situation with Beyonce and Destiny's Child. Beyonce always overshadowed Kelly and Michelle. The Illuminati comes after the one with the most obvious talent in the group. They choose the person that is capable of influencing the most amount of people. Now, in the first part of this video, I made the statement that Beyonce was a top-level witch. So let's look at her and see why I said that. Remember when Beyonce used to be the innocent, squeaky clean church girl turned R&B singer? Well, those days are over. Beyonce is gone, and Sasha Fierce is here. And if you pay close attention, you would have seen the death of Beyonce and the birth of Sasha Fierce take place right in front of your eyes. Let me show you when and how it happened. Now, after Beyonce left Destiny's Child, her first solo video was called Crazy in Love. In this video, you see Beyonce trapped in a car. Now watch what happens to her. Did you catch what happened? The innocent, squeaky clean Beyonce died inside that car. Her life ended and Sasha Fierce was born. Here's a quote from Beyonce out of the People magazine November 18th issue. Sasha Fierce was born when I did Crazy in Love. People, when they meet me, expect that all the time, but that person is strictly for the stage. Now notice she said that Sasha Fierce was born when she did Crazy in Love. And at the end of the quote, she said that person, referring to Sasha Fierce. So she's saying that Sasha Fierce is a person that was born. Now, through the grace of the Most High, we understand that that car explosion was symbolic of the death of Beyonce and the birth of Sasha Fierce. It's no coincidence that Jay-Z is the one who started the fire that took Beyonce's life, because Jay-Z is the one who brought Beyonce into the Illuminati. Now notice, the car exploded, Beyonce dies, and out comes Sasha Fierce. This video was a ritual showing the world that Beyonce was now initiated into the Illuminati. That's why you see her doing the Eye of Horus sign. Now Jay-Z and his crew call it the rock sign to deceive people, but this symbol is the Eye of Horus.
How it came about being a lyricist is weird, because I started out technically, like I used to write all the time, before I started going into the Rain Man thing, before I started going into the Rain Man thing,
I sold my soul to the devil.
Beyonce eventually married Jay-Z, and now you have the most powerful male rapper and the most powerful female R&B pop singer working together to help carry out the mission of the Illuminati against the public. And in return, they get more fame and more money. Beyonce's so-called alter ego Sasha Fierce is nothing but a demon that possesses her when she performs. She has become comfortable with that demon because it allows her to let go of her inhibitions and do the things that she wouldn't normally do. Beyonce is possessed. Let's hear her explain Sasha Fierce in her own words on the Oprah show.
Sasha Fierce. Sasha Fierce. Like, when you're getting ready to go on stage and perform, does Sasha Fierce, when does she show up?
Usually when I hear the crowd, when I put on my stilettos, when, like, the moment right before when you're nervous and that other thing kind of takes over for you. And that other thing kind of takes over for you. And that other thing kind of takes over for you.
That other thing that takes over, that's called a demon. Here she is on Tyra's show talking about Sasha Fierce.
And you know what's so funny is I saw you turn into that trance thing. Like, you lose your mind.
I do.
Like, I was like,
you know, it's really amazing. I can't describe it. It's just something that takes over me, and we named it Sasha. It's just something that takes over me, and we named it Sasha because it's like two different people.
She said it's like two different people, but it's not two different people. It's one person with two different spirits. You got Beyonce, and then you got that demon spirit, Sasha Fierce, that lives in her body. See, these are the things that's going on that most people have no clue about. The music industry is not what most people think it is. This demon, Baphomet, is set up over the music industry. Like I said earlier, these celebrities worship Baphomet, and they show you all the time that they worship him, but you just don't notice it. Take a close look at this picture of Baphomet. Now look at what Beyonce is wearing in this picture. Here you have Beyonce wearing a Baphomet suit. She is deep into the Illuminati and Satan worship. She is a demoness. What does she call herself? She calls herself a diva. Diva is a Latin word that means goddess, which proves that she's presenting herself as a god. Let's look at a scripture, Isaiah 47:8. Therefore, hear now this, thou that art given to pleasures, that dwellest carelessly, that saith in thine heart, I am, and none else beside me. I shall not sit as a widow, neither shall I know the loss of children. See, that's the attitude of these celebrities. They live carelessly because they have everything they want. So they don't have a need to trust in the Most High. They feel untouchable, like nothing can happen to them. Verse 9. But these two things shall come to thee in a moment, in one day, the loss of children and widowhood. They shall come upon thee in their perfection, for the multitude of thy sorceries and for the great abundance of thine enchantments. See, the Most High is saying he's going to bring them all down off their pedestals because they're proud and they don't trust in him. Also, they're deceiving masses of people. They're using sorceries and enchantments by casting spells through their music and videos. Don't you know that the record executives get together and pray demonic prayers over the music before they release it to the public? They cast spells onto the music so that when you hear it, it influences you the way they want you to be influenced. That's a common practice in the music industry. They pray demonic prayers onto the music so that demons get on you when you listen to it. That's wicked. All right, let's go back to Isaiah 47 and read verse 10. For thou hast trusted in thy wickedness. Thou hast said, none seeth me. See, Beyonce is trusting in her wickedness and in the wicked system she's involved in. She tries to hide and act like she's not a part of anything bad. She tries to present herself as a believer in the Most High, but yet, when she's on stage, she's half naked, gyrating, and bouncing all over the place as if nobody sees what she's doing. Let's read the last part of verse 10. Thy wisdom and thy knowledge, it hath perverted thee, and thou hast said in thine heart, I am, and none else beside me. Now the scripture said that thine have said in thine heart, I am. Let's see what Beyonce's last album was called. She named it I Am. Now why did she name it I Am? Let's see. Exodus 3:14. And God said unto Moses, I am that I am. And he said, Thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, I am have sent me unto you. So just like her husband named himself Hova, which is a name of the Most High, Beyonce named her album I Am, which is another name of the Most High. She is saying that she is God. Now some of you might say that I'm reading too far into that, but you don't understand the way these people think. A lot of these celebrities are into ancient Babylonian teachings. They believe that they have attained God's status through their illuminated minds. Hence the name Illuminati, which means the enlightened ones. That's why the scripture said in Isaiah 47:10, Thy wisdom and thy knowledge, it hath perverted thee, and thou hast said in thine heart, I am, and none else beside me. Now another reason why Beyonce was chosen, besides her talent, is her beauty. The Illuminati through the media floods your mind with all these images of her, and then young girls and women want to dress and act just like her. Then you have young boys and men lusting after her. They use her voice and beauty as a form of witchcraft to seduce people and control them. But the scriptures warn us about that. Proverbs 6:25 says, Lust not after her beauty in thine heart, neither let her take thee with her eyelids. See, people get caught up in her voice and her looks, and they look up to her as if she's a great role model. But the truth is, she's a horrible role model. A lot of these people have had nose jobs, lip jobs, butt jobs, breast jobs, hair extensions, fake eyelashes, and all types of stuff, all to create this perfect image, an idol for you to worship. She acts like she's innocent, but the whole time she's leading people into devil worship. Now you might be saying that it's just a coincidence that she married Jay-Z. It's just a coincidence that she calls herself a diva. It's just a coincidence she was wearing that demonic suit. Well, let me show you something. Because Beyonce is not innocent. She knows exactly what she's doing. Everything she does is planned and well thought out. Take a good look at this picture. Now this robot suit is the outfit that Beyonce came out in at the 2007 BET Awards. Now when you look at this outfit, you might say she was being creative and it's just a robot suit. But remember, I told you that everything she does is planned and for a reason. Look at her suit again. Now look at this picture. Wow, look at that. The same robot, same pose, and everything. But notice what's on the back wall in this picture? It's a demonic upside down star, which is the same symbol as this star, the demonic goat head, which is just a representation of Baphomet. Like I said, the music industry is more than what you see on the surface. You got people that are just straight up worshiping Satan, and they're doing it right in front of our faces. This picture on the screen comes from a 1927 movie called Metropolis. I'll show you a piece of it. The part of the movie you're looking at is where a woman named Maria is kidnapped by a mad scientist. He then uses his machines to create an evil robotic version of Maria. She ends up becoming a performer in a nightclub where the scientist uses her to control the men of the city and manipulate the people. Whenever she starts to dance, the men go into a frenzy. They start to lust after her and fall into some type of demonic trance. The more she dances, the deeper they fall into the trance. She uses all types of dance moves to hypnotize these men until they're fully under her spell. They get so caught up in watching her that they don't realize what they're doing. They don't realize they're actually under a spell. How crazy is that? This is Maria in her robotic form. And this is Beyonce in the same suit. Now, do you still think it's a coincidence that she chose to wear this robotic suit? She is doing the same thing that the robot in the movie did. She's dancing around, mesmerizing and hypnotizing men. See, one of the biggest tricks that Beyonce uses is that she presents herself to the public in two different ways. One is this quiet, innocent, shy girl, and the other is this fierce, sexual, I can do anything woman, which leaves a big gray area in between for people to decide who she really is. The problem with that is this. Beyonce claims to be a follower of Christ, but you can't be a follower of Christ and act like Satan. You gotta be one or the other, either good or evil. Tyra Banks actually points out the same thing on her show. Watch this clip.
And it's funny because it's really unreal to see. Like, what overtakes you? Because it's like, you see her right now, she's like, hi, everybody. Yes,
There's a chart I saw recently that I can't get out of my head. A Harvard business professor and economist asked more than 5,000 Americans how they thought wealth was distributed in the United States. This is what they said they thought it was. Dividing the country into 5 rough groups of the top, bottom, and middle 3 20% groups, they asked people how they thought the wealth in this country was divided. Then he asked them what they thought was the ideal distribution, and 92%, that's at least 9 out of 10 of them, said it should be more like this. In other words, more equitable than they think it is. Now that fact is telling, admittedly, the notion that most Americans know that the system is already skewed unfairly. But what's most interesting to me is the reality compared to our perception. The ideal is as far removed from our perception of reality as the actual distribution is from what we think exists in this country. So ignore the ideal for a moment. Here's what we think it is again. And here is the actual distribution. Shockingly skewed. Not only do the bottom 20% and the next 20%, the bottom 40% of Americans barely have any of the wealth. I mean, it's hard to even see them on the chart. But the top Americans believe the entire top 20% should have. Mind-blowing. But let's look at it another way, because I find this chart kind of difficult to wrap my head around. Instead, let's reduce the 311 million Americans to just a representative 100 people. Make it simple. Here they are. Teachers, coaches, firefighters, construction workers, engineers, doctors, lawyers, some investment bankers, a CEO, maybe a celebrity or two. Now let's line them up according to their wealth. Poorest people on the left, wealthiest on the right, just a steady row of folks based on their net worth. We'll color code them like we did before based on which 20% quintile they fall into. Now let's reduce the total wealth of the United States, which was roughly $54 trillion in 2009, to this symbolic pile of cash. And let's distribute it among our 100 Americans. Well, here's socialism, all the wealth of the country distributed equally. We all know that won't work. We need to encourage people to work and work hard to achieve that good old American dream and keep our country moving forward. So, here's that ideal we asked everyone about. Something like this curve. This isn't too bad. We've got some incentive, as the wealthiest folks are now about 10 to 20 times better off than the poorest Americans. But hey, even the poor folks aren't actually poor, since the poverty line has stayed almost entirely off the chart. We have a super healthy middle class with a smooth transition into wealth. And yes, Republicans and Democrats alike chose this curve. 9 out of 10 people, 92%, said this was a nice, ideal distribution of America's wealth. But let's move on. This is what people think America's wealth distribution actually looks like. Not as equitable, clearly, but for me, even this still looks pretty great. Yes, the poorest 20 to 30% are starting to suffer quite a lot compared to the ideal, and the middle class is certainly struggling more than they were, while the rich and wealthy are making roughly 100 times that of the poorest Americans, and about 10 times that of the still healthy middle class. Sadly, this isn't even close to the reality. Here is the actual distribution of wealth in America. The poorest Americans don't even register. They're down to pocket change. And the middle class is barely distinguishable from the poor. In fact, even the rich between the top 10 and 20 percentile are worse off. Only the top 10% are better off. And how much better off? So much better off that the top 2 to 5% are actually off the chart at this scale. And the top 1%, this guy, well, his stack of money stretches 10 times higher than we can show. Here's his stack of cash, restacked, all by itself. This is the top 1% we've been hearing so much about. So much green in his pockets that I have to give him a whole new column of his own, because he won't fit on my chart. 1% of America has 40% of all the nation's wealth. The bottom 80%, 8 out of every 10 people, or 80 out of these 100, only has 7% between them. And this has only gotten worse in the last 20 to 30 years. While the richest 1% take home almost a quarter of the national income today, in 1976, they took home only 9%, meaning their share of income has nearly tripled in the last 30 years. The top 1% own half the country's stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. The bottom 50% of Americans own only 0.5% of these investments, which means they aren't investing. They're just scraping by. I'm sure many of these wealthy people have worked very hard for their money, but do you really believe that the CEO is working 380 times harder than his average employee? Not his lowest paid employee, not the janitor, but the average earner in his company. The average worker needs to work more than a month to earn what the CEO makes in 1 hour. We certainly don't have to go all the way to socialism to find something that is fair for hardworking Americans. We don't even have to achieve what most of us consider might be ideal. All we need to do is wake up and realize that the reality in this country is not at all what we think it is.
Every human on this planet is enslaved, whether they know it or not. This is not the crude and primitive slavery of ancient times. It does not rely on whips and shackles to keep the oppressed in their place. These tools have been rendered obsolete by much more sophisticated methods. That most of the enslaved are unaware of their condition and would in fact argue fiercely that they are free is a testament to the effectiveness of these invisible chains. You've heard the expression, money makes the world go round. There's truth in that. Money is the prime motive for human labor in modern civilization. If you want food, shelter, and clothing, you must have money. And unless you're part of that tiny minority that has more money than they could ever spend in their lifetime, then you must work, beg, or steal for that money. That's why you get up in the morning and go to work, even if you hate your job. And that's why the specter of unemployment is more terrifying for most people than the prospect of spending 50 years of their life performing menial tasks within the confines of a fluorescent-lit cubicle. Of course, in Western countries, some are fortunate enough to have pulled away from the brink and do not live in fear that their basic needs will be met, at least for now. And yet they keep spinning the hamster wheel. Why is that? Could it be because money and the bling that it buys have become symbols of status and prestige? Money offers an illusory form of social validation, but even those who are not caught up in distinguishing themselves by how much they accumulate still must acknowledge the social stigma that comes with poverty. The combination of these primal motivators, the need for food, shelter, clothing, and social validation, is a very powerful force. It's enough to drive humans to engage in all forms of activity, even to the point of harming themselves or others in the process. The accumulation of money is therefore an accumulation of social and psychological power, and those who control the creation of money control this power at its source. So who controls the creation of money? Well, in the case of the US dollar, it's not the government. This shouldn't be an earth-shattering revelation. The fact that the Federal Reserve is a private institution owned by a cartel of the world's most powerful banks is quickly becoming common knowledge. Even the mainstream media doesn't deny it at this point. However, the full extent of what this means is only clear when you understand how the banking system really works. And unfortunately, this isn't something we're taught in school. Once you have it explained to you in simple terms, you'll understand why. Every dollar in circulation is loaned into existence by a bank. The process begins with the Federal Reserve when they loan out money to the US government and to other entities. You've probably heard this talked about before, especially in regards to the interest rate on those loans, which the Federal Reserve raises and lowers depending on economic conditions. But what's never talked about in the mainstream is the fact that the Fed isn't actually loaning out money that they have. They are merely typing those dollars into existence on a computer. You may be inclined to believe that this money is based on some physical backing like gold, but you would be mistaken. The Federal Reserve hasn't owned any gold since the 1930s.
The Federal Reserve does not own any gold at all. We have not owned gold since 1934. So we have not engaged in any gold swaps.
When the Federal Reserve loans money to the U.S. government gives the Federal Reserve government bonds in exchange. These bonds are simply written promises to pay back the money that was loaned to them with interest through taxation. So to be clear here, the government is taking out a loan from a bank that's creating that money out of thin air, and they're expecting you, the taxpayer, to cover that loan. The absurdity of this arrangement is even more obvious when you realize that up until 1913, the US government created its own money and had no need for a bank to play the part of a middleman. That new money loaned out by the Federal Reserve enters circulation through the banks, accumulates in the banks, and in the end the banks end up holding all the cards. Not necessarily for the reasons you may imagine. Contrary to popular belief, the majority of money in circulation isn't actually created by the Federal Reserve, but rather by the ordinary banks that businesses and individuals use for their checking, savings, and mortgages. How is this possible? Well, like the Federal Reserve, ordinary banks are allowed to loan out money that they don't have. There are, of course, restrictions. Banks are only allowed to loan out 10 times the amount of money that they actually have. So if Wells Fargo has $1,000, they can loan you $10,000, and they expect you to pay back that $10,000 plus interest. This is called fractional reserve banking. 75% of all money in circulation is created in this manner. Now, as bad as this may seem, this is really only the tip of the iceberg. Most banks structure payment plans so that for many years, you're paying almost nothing but interest, and only start paying down the principal gradually. The result of this strategy is that in most cases, you pay far more in interest when you purchase a house than the house itself is worth. So here's the real question. If all money is created through loans, where does the money come from to pay for the interest? Let's say we reset the system to zero, loan $1,000 into existence, and charge 7% interest. We now have a total of $1,000 in the system, but we owe $1,000 plus interest, and that's more. The interest ensures that there's always more debt than money in circulation, because the money to pay the interest doesn't exist. Never has, never will. This would be obvious if there was only one loan being issued to one person in this manner, but when performed on a global scale, the reality is hidden and is transformed into a game of musical chairs where the person ending up without a seat faces bankruptcy and financial ruin. Because every dollar in existence is tied to a debt, this creates an unseen force that draws those dollars back to the banks, kind of like gravity attracts a physical object to Earth. The catch here is that it's the labor of the people that moves that money. Every hour that you work to pay back a loan or to keep the government from throwing you in jail over income taxes is an hour worked for the banks. The total receipts from personal income taxes just barely covers the interest on the national debt. And even the principal for that debt all ends up back in the hands of the banks. And remember, that bank created that money out of nothing. Once you understand that the money that banks loan out isn't actually an asset, but is in fact a piece of legal fiction, It should be clear that you're working for these banks for free. This is a cleverly disguised form of slavery. If you manage to pay your monthly payments, then you are a successful slave, and you are allowed to keep the material comforts that come with that status. But if for some reason you fail to make those monthly payments, then the bank or the IRS comes to take your house, your car, and anything else you have of value. And if somehow, even with this enormous financial advantage, the banks still get themselves into trouble, you, the taxpayer, will be forced to bail them out. No matter what, the banks win. To say the game is rigged is an understatement. You might be inclined to think that if you live outside the United States and you don't use dollars, then this situation has no bearing on your life. But you would be wrong. The dollar is both the world reserve currency and the only currency in which oil is sold on global markets. This is often referred to as the petrodollar status. This means that wherever you live, whether your country is an oil exporter or an oil importer, you are affected. If your country is an oil importer, then you are affected by the fact that in order to keep your country running, you have to acquire dollars. To acquire those dollars, you have to send goods and services to the United States or to someone else who did. Likewise, if your country is an oil exporter, you are affected by the fact that you send your oil to the U.S. in exchange for this debt-based money. You are exchanging something of real and tangible value for digits on a screen. And if for some reason the leadership of your country grows tired of this arrangement and tries to pull off the dollar, you'll quickly find the United States military at your doorstep ready to open up a can of democracy on you. Iraq learned this the hard way when they switched their oil sales to euros in 2000, and Libya when they tried to organize a gold-based currency for Africa. Debt-based money is a masterpiece of social engineering, the ultimate tool of the ruling elite. Yet in reality, the whole thing is nothing more than a construct of belief. Our chains are the chains of the mind, and the path to freedom must also begin in the mind. If we want a better future for our children and grandchildren, then we must work right now to reach a critical mass of awakening. Why did the United States attack Libya, Iraq, Afghanistan, and Yemen? Why are U.S. operatives helping to destabilize Syria? And why is the United States government so intent on taking down Iran, in spite of the fact that Iran has not attacked any country since 1798? And what's next? What are we headed for? When you look at the current trajectory that we're on, it doesn't make any sense at all if you evaluate it based on what we're taught in school. And it doesn't make any sense if you base your worldview on the propaganda that the mainstream media tries to pass off as news. But it makes perfect sense once you know the real motives of the powers that be. In order to understand those motives, we first have to take a look at history. In 1945, the Bretton Woods Agreement established the dollar as the world reserve currency, which meant that international commodities were priced in dollars. The agreement, which gave the United States a distinct financial advantage, was made under the condition that those dollars would remain redeemable for gold at a consistent rate of $35 per ounce. The United States promised not to print very much money, but this was on the honor system, because the Federal Reserve refused to allow any audits or supervision of its printing presses. In the years leading up to 1970, expenditures in the Vietnam War made it clear to many countries that the U.S. was printing far more money than it had in gold. And in response, they began to ask for their gold back. This, of course, set off a rapid decline in the value of the dollar. The situation climaxed in 1971 when France attempted to withdraw its gold and Nixon refused. On August 15th, he made the following announcement.
I have directed the Secretary of the Treasury to take the action necessary to defend the dollar against the speculators. I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets, except in amounts and conditions determined to be in the interest of monetary stability and in the best interest of the United States.
This was obviously not a temporary suspension, as he claimed, but rather a permanent default. And for the rest of the world who had entrusted the United States with their gold, it was outright theft. In 1973, President Nixon asked King Faisal of Saudi Arabia to accept only U.S. dollars as payment for oil and to invest any excess profits in U.S. Treasury bonds, notes, and bills. In return, Nixon offered military protection for Saudi oil fields. The same offer was extended to each of the world's key oil-producing countries, and by 1975, every member of OPEC had agreed to only sell their oil in U.S. dollars. The act of moving the dollar off of gold and tying it to foreign oil instantly forced every oil-importing country in the world to start maintaining a constant supply of Federal Reserve paper. And in order to get that paper, they would have to send real physical goods to America. This was the birth of the petrodollar. Paper went out, Everything America needed came in, and the United States got very, very rich as a result. It was the largest financial con in recorded history. The arms race of the Cold War was a game of poker. Military expenditures were the chips, and the U.S. had an endless supply of chips. With the petrodollar under its belt, it was able to raise the stakes higher and higher, outspending every other country on the planet, until eventually U.S. military expenditures surpassed that of all other nations in the world combined. The Soviet Union never had a chance. The collapse of the communist bloc in 1991 removed the last counterbalance to American military might. The United States was now an undisputed superpower with no rival. Many hoped that this would mark the beginning of a new era of peace and stability. Unfortunately, there were those in high places who had other ideas. Within that same year, the U.S. invaded Iraq in the first Gulf War. And after crushing the Iraqi military and destroying their infrastructure, including water purification plants and hospitals, crippling sanctions were imposed which prevented that infrastructure from being rebuilt. These sanctions, which were initiated by Bush Sr. and sustained throughout the entire Clinton administration, lasted for over a decade and were estimated to have killed over 500,000 children. The Clinton administration was fully aware of these figures.
We have heard that 500,000 children have died. I mean, that's more children than died in Hiroshima. And, you know, is the price worth it?
I think this is a very hard choice, but we think the price is worth it.
Ms. Albright, what exactly was it that was worth killing 500,000 kids for? In November of 2000, Iraq began selling its oil exclusively in euros. This was a direct attack on the dollar and on U.S. financial dominance, and it wasn't going to be tolerated. In response, the U.S. government, with the assistance of the mainstream media, began to build up a massive propaganda campaign claiming that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction and was planning to use them. In 2003, the U.S. invaded, and once they had control of the country, oil sales were immediately switched back to dollars. This is particularly notable due to the fact that switching back to the dollar meant a 15 to 20% loss in revenue due to the euro's higher value. It doesn't make any sense at all unless you take the petrodollar into account.
To preserve our independence, we must not let our rulers load us with perpetual debt. We must make our choice between economy and liberty or profusion and servitude. Wow. I place economy among the first and most important of Republican virtues, and public debt is the greatest of the dangers to be feared. It is incumbent on every generation to pay its own debts as it goes.
We must have a central bank to secure this country's finances.
If the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of their money, first by inflation and then by deflation, the banks and corporations that will grow up around them will deprive the people of their property until their children will wake up homeless on the very continent their fathers conquered.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence.
What's happening? Where am I? I believe perhaps you understand now, pal, but you are afraid. JFK, Hartman, what does this have to do with my house and my dog? Oh, okay, that's enough. I want to go home now. This is the last president to stand up to the Fed. You must see. On June 4, 1963, President Kennedy signed Executive Order 11110. This executive order empowered the U.S. Treasury to issue real money without the Fed. It would have worked. Kennedy's plan to dismantle the Federal Reserve machine had begun. 6 months later, John F. Kennedy went to Dallas and never returned. No way. No way they could do that. The new president, Lyndon Johnson, threw out Kennedy's order. And since JFK, no president has dared confront the secret powers behind the Federal Reserve. They consolidate bigger and bigger banks, print more and more money, accountable to no one, decimating our nation's wealth for the benefit of a few. Why? Why do this?
anyway, I've had people calling me saying they go out to their mailbox and they find a little red dot or a little blue dot on their mailbox, and they wonder what the little red dot and blue dot is. Well, it's marking your mailbox by the government, so when foreign troops come in here on us after martial law, if you have a red dot on your mailbox, they take you out immediately and shoot you right in the head. But if you have a blue dot, they take you to the FEMA camps being built by Halliburton right now to house 50 million Americans. They're building enough concentration camps in America by Halliburton that Cheney's getting rich off of, Vice President Cheney's getting rich off of, to put those with the blue dot on your mailbox in those concentration camps. Now, if you go out and you find a pink dot on your mailbox, that means that they believe you'll be a good slave and you're going to go along with the program and serve our international Antichrist masters. So watch for that dot.
Have you heard that the Department of Homeland Security has purchased 1.6 billion rounds of ammunition last year? I mean, that's got to cost millions and millions of dollars. Correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't this country broke? I mean, you turn on the TV, you hear how we're laying off air traffic controllers, how people are going to die because of it. I mean, Harrison Ford is in a tizzy, and we're spending this much money on bullets? Do you know that 1.6 billion rounds of ammunition is enough to fight a 20-year war and still have bullets left over? My question is, who is the Department of Homeland Security planning to shoot? Do you realize that over the past couple of months, our government has tried to pass bills through Congress allowing them to arrest American citizens without due process, allowing them to kill American citizens without due process?
An ad hoc legal approach for fighting terrorism. President Obama today proposed something new, something called prolonged detention. Doesn't sound that bad, right? Prolonged detention. Did you ever see the movie Minority Report? It was based on a Philip K. Dick short story. Came out in 2002. It starred Tom Cruise, remember? He played a police officer in something called the Department of Pre-Crime. Pre-crime is where people are arrested and incarcerated to prevent crimes that they have not yet committed.
Mr. Marks, by mandate of the District of Columbia Pre-Crime Division, I'm placing you under arrest for the future murder of Sarah Marks and Donald Dumanos. Take place today, April 22nd, at 0800 hours, 4 minutes. No, I didn't do anything.
You didn't do anything, but you're gonna. Future murder. Creepy, right? Putting somebody in jail not for what they've done, but for what you're very sure they're going to do?
There may be a number of people who cannot be prosecuted for past crimes. In some cases because evidence may be tainted, but who nonetheless pose a threat to the security of the United States.
We're not prosecuting them for past crimes, but we need to keep them in prison because of our expectation of their future crimes.
Al-Qaeda terrorists and their affiliates are at war with the United States, and those that we capture, like other prisoners of war, must be prevented from attacking us again.
Prevented. We will incarcerate people preventively. Preventive incarceration. Indefinite detention without trial. That's what this is. That's what President Obama proposed today, if you strip away the euphemisms. One civil liberties advocate told the New York Times today, quote, "We've known this was on the horizon for many years, but we were able to hold it off with George Bush. The idea that we might find ourselves fighting with the Obama administration over these powers is really stunning." And it is stunning.
And it's got the 5 regions for the FEMA camps, and it talks about barricades and barbed wire and armed guards, and it says that they built the camps and that now they need to get ready to staff them, and that they need to be ready within a 72-hour period. And so I want to challenge everybody to call their friends and their families now and realize that the new economy is to put tens of millions of people, we already have the biggest prison population in the world, in this archipelago, this giant chain of facilities all over the country.
The following video details the contents of a Department of Defense document entitled Internment and Resettlement Operations, also known as FM 3-39.40. The The document is 325 pages long and it is signed by Joyce E. Morrow, Administrative Assistant to the Secretary of the Army. It was created in 2010, however, it's just been recently leaked to the public via the internet and can now be downloaded from multiple sources. In the description below, you'll find a download link for the document. I strongly encourage you to download it yourself and to verify everything that's being said here. The document outlines military procedures for internment and resettlement of civilians, and it describes the layout and the administration of these internment camps. It clearly states on page 38 that it applies within U.S. territory, and it specifically addresses the detainment of U.S. citizens, as is indicated by the identification procedures for new prisoners on page 146, which states that social security numbers are to be recorded alongside their photograph and fingerprints. Included in the list of organizations which may be involved in these internment operations are the Department of Homeland Security, FEMA, the Department of Defense, and the United Nations. On page 56, the document outlines the responsibilities of psychological operations officers within the camps, among which it states that a PSYOP officer develops and executes indoctrination programs to reduce or remove antagonistic attitudes and identifies political activists. On page 281, the document goes into more detail regarding the role of psychological operations within the camps, specifically in regards to pacifying the population and ensuring cooperation. On page 238, it gives the conditions for the use of deadly force in such camps. Among the justifications for lethal force, it includes to terminate an active escape attempt. That point right there should make it clear that these camps are not benevolent disaster relief type facilities. On page 244, the document calls for the use of snipers during riots to, quote, scan a crowd and identify agitators and riot leaders for apprehension and fire lethal rounds if warranted. On page 260, it shows the basic layout for a facility focusing on detainment. It is depicted with interrogation areas, tribunal areas, and mortuaries. Each detainment facility is designed to hold 4,000 prisoners, and they are depicted with multiple levels of barbed wire separating compartments within the facilities, with a double barbed wire fence enclosing them, and watched over by 24 guard towers. On page 261, the document depicts the layout for what they call civilian resettlement facilities, which are designed to house 8,000 people. Though it uses the word resettlement, the plans show multiple levels of barbed wire dividing the sections of the facility, with double barbed wire fencing on the outside, as well as 16 guard towers. On page 262, the layout for facilities designed for what they call non-compliant prisoners is shown. These camps are designed to hold up to 300 prisoners, they have 3 interrogation centers, and are guarded by 13 guard towers. Now, if there's any question whether these plans are active or just theoretical, this should be settled by the fact that the U.S. Army has been running ads for job positions in these camps since 2009, and apparently, they're still hiring. Once again, if you look in the description, you'll find all the links you need to verify this information. It's important to note here that this document was created in 2010, which was under the Obama administration, and it predates the NDAA of 2012, which authorized military detainment of U.S. citizens. This clearly shows a long-term agenda at work.
Listen to this, folks.
I was pulled to the side road, which was a new cut gravel dirt road in front of a business, a builder's supply business. And the right side of the road was filled with, which I thought was portable toilets. I never looked at them that close. Same in color, maybe black, but which was an odd color. And I asked him about the field of black boxes. What were they? Because I'd never seen anything like that. And his statement was that if he told me, I would be one of few people in Madison, Georgia that knew about them. And he says they're disposable coffins, I believe he told me. And he says there's 100, at that time, he said there was 125,000 there.
And the brother of the man that owns this field, that the government is leasing this field from to store these disposable coffins, this brother was given 3 years to set up temporary morgues around the country.
We now have a policy as exemplified by the FBI brochure from the on counterterrorism, which says people who are defenders of the U.S. Constitution against federal government and the UN and make numerous references to the U.S. Constitution should be monitored as potentially murderous and fanatical terrorists.
Department of Justice memo, which tells local police what should you be looking out for in kind of everyday terrorism prevention and terrorism watch activities. And one of the things that is considered a potential terrorist risk is individuals who harbor doubts about the official story regarding 9/11. The memo adds 9/11 official story skeptics to the growing list of targets.
If you go outside the city of Atlanta, go east about 60 or 70 miles to the town of Elberton, and then go north on Highway 77 about 10 miles, you'll find off to the right what's called the Georgia Guidestones. Looks kind of like Stonehenge, these big, huge granite rocks set up there. This was done by a guy who gave a pseudonym, came in, paid cash, had this company set these things up in 1980. He called himself R.C. Christian, but that's not his real name. It says right on the stones, a pseudonym, false name. On these Georgia Guidestones, it gives the 10 Commandments for the New World Order. 10 Commandments for the New World Order. The first commandment was to maintain humanity under 500 million. I went there and looked at those things and said, now, hold on a minute. Today's population is 6 billion. They want to maintain humanity under 500 million. Looks like a lot of people got to die for their plan to work, which is, by the way, the plan. Jacques Cousteau said we'd have to eliminate 350,000 people a day. 1/3 of a million people a day would have to be eliminated to save Mother Earth. Bill Clinton said we need to reduce the population of the Earth to 1 billion. There are a lot of folks who would like to reduce the population of the Earth. The Bible command is quite the opposite.
My friends, the information that you are about to witness from all of my years of research is the most important. It's been hidden in plain view the entire time. This is the ultimate secret, and it's about to be exposed. I have hundreds of government documents, textbooks, white papers, where for over 80 years, the elite of the Western world have talked about adulterating food and water to sicken and sterilize the population for the purpose of eugenics. It's all covered in the book Eco-Science, written by the White House science czar John P. Holdren, where they talk about a planetary police state to carry out the forced sterilization. They also talk about covert systems in the water and food to sterilize the population. Now, this was written decades ago, before he was White House science czar. Now, suddenly, the stuff in this book is all over the news. They're selling it to the public as if it's a good thing. You see here before you what an average person would buy when they went shopping at the store. Not everything here is bad for you, but much of it has compounds and artificial chemicals that have been added that are extremely toxic and bad for your health, and they have known this the entire time, and they have approved them for use. Let's start with aspartame. You cannot go to the grocery store now and buy any type of even regular sugar gum that hasn't had aspartame added to it. In the 1970s, Searle tried to get it approved, and they couldn't. It took them 3 separate times because in their own studies with monkeys, large portions of them that were fed it died and contracted cancer. Now we have mainstream news articles, and the EU has done a major study finding lower birth weights, early birth, and yes, miscarriages from women that drink aspartame-laden soft drinks like Coke Zero. What is aspartame? It is the fecal matter of the E. coli bacteria. They took it and genetically engineered it. They can feed it toxic waste, and then it defecates aspartame. And it has so many bad health effects, it's just unspeakable. This is being done by design. It's also very, very addictive. But let's just go ahead and move away from aspartame and talk about McDonald's and chicken McNuggets. Now, I remember a decade ago or so reading health advisories claiming that a form of plastic that's used in silly putty, basically a type of silicone, was in the chicken McNuggets, but also in many other TV dinners and other foods. It is illegal in every other nation in the world to add these chemicals to the food, but it's not in the United States. The big secret is all of this was done by design by the FDA. Look at all the drugs they've approved, and then it comes out later that they knowingly approve them when these drugs are causing heart attacks and cancer. In the Nuremberg trials, it came out that the Nazis were adding sodium fluoride to the water supply in the labor camps and death camps to make the population more docile and controllable. There had been hundreds of university studies before Hitler even came to power. This is a form of forced medication. They admit that 1 part per million of sodium fluoride more than doubles the chance of bone cancer in boys and men. As the public became educated in the last few decades, the government and industry's response was to not just put it in water, but to start adding it to thousands of products like children's water that's mixed with their formula or with their cereal. They started adding as much as 900 parts per million in things like powdered eggs. It causes reductions in IQ. It increases sterility or lack of fertility, and it's being added to so many of the daily staples that we consume. We'll get back to food additives in a moment. But first, I wanted to look at genetically modified organisms. Did you know for many years the American people have been eating cloned beef and pork, and now they're expanding out into other forms of meat? Let's look at salmon first. Major university studies conclusively have proven that the type of genetically modified salmon that is actually a cross species, they've mixed other animal genes in with it, that when this fish is introduced with wild natural salmon, within 40 generations, all of the natural salmon are extinct. And the FDA approved this, and they're going to allow it to be released into the wild that isn't even a salmon. It is a cross-species chimera. It is a mixture like something out of the island of Dr. Moreau, something out of a nightmare. More than 85% of the corn now consumed in the United States, and it's also starting to trend that way in Europe and Canada, is genetically engineered. It grows its own pesticide within the corn kernels so that insects won't eat it. If the insects can't eat this and live, what do you think is going to happen when lab rats or humans eat it? We have literally hundreds of studies showing that not just Monsanto's, but other major GMO companies' corn, that's the majority of corn we're now eating today in the United States, has been linked to organ failure in lab animals. The studies also show massive increases in sterility in rats and guinea pigs that are fed not just GMO corn, but GMO cotton seeds. Studies in India, Germany, and the United States have conclusively shown that when they feed the cotton seeds left over from the cotton crop from these genetically modified varieties, that the cows are having miscarriages, they are having low birth weights, or in many cases, they're simply dying. And what is in most processed foods? Genetically modified cottonseed oil. Major studies are also showing that genetically engineered crops are killing honeybees and monarch butterflies. But they don't stop there. Now they claim they're coming out with a genetically engineered mosquito that's malaria-proof that they're going to release into the open biosphere. The very genetic code of the planet is being butchered in a hostile corporate takeover. Many years ago, an executive from Monsanto was quoted in National Geographic as saying that that is their program, that they want to basically have their crops and their organisms take over the entire biosphere of this planet. And the major genetic engineer companies have focused mainly on 8 major food crops. Now they're expanding out into hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of other plants, literally changing the genetic code of the planet. This is a genetic dictatorship. This is genetic vandalism. And that's why the Rockefellers, the United Nations, and others have built these giant armored seed vaults all over the world, not just at the Arctic Circle. And they admit they're doing it in case all of this gets out of hand, that they'll have a type of Noah's Ark. So all these fake environmental groups, they never complain about this. They never talk about true environmental degradation. They want to put a tax on carbon dioxide that humans exhale, that plants respirate from and carry out photosynthesis with, as a way to shut down industrial society and control every facet of our lives. That's the big secret. This is a population reduction program. It is an epidemic. The sperm count has dropped in the Western world exponentially. Even the government has been predicting within another generation almost everyone is going to be sterile. This is the globalist religion. This is their philosophy. They want the planet for themselves. The UN has said that their stated plan is an 80% population reduction.
There's been a bit of an uproar this past week due to Obama's signing of a recent bill that has become affectionately labeled the Monsanto Protection Act, or H.R. 933. So much so that it's led Senator Barbara Mikulski to publicly apologize for letting the provisions slip through. However, this is really only a small part of a much bigger pattern of corruption and collusion between Monsanto and the U.S. government. Senator Roy Blunt, a Republican from Missouri, who crafted the wording for H.R. 933, has been accused by Senator John Tester of having collaborated directly with Monsanto in the creation of the provision. This shouldn't be surprising considering that Monsanto is one of Blunt's top campaign contributors. Blunt also accepts contributions from the Crawford Group, a registered lobbyist for Monsanto. Now, the controversy in this bill is tied to Section 735, which is of course written in such a jumble of incomprehensible legalese that it's highly difficult to interpret. It's designed to make the eyes glaze over without registering that anything of significance has been stated. This is facilitated using a common legislative technique of referring to sections of a separate law, so that you have to go read the unintelligible fine print in that second document in order to understand what's actually being said. That second law in this case is the Plant Protection Act. In the description of this video, you'll find a link to both documents. Now, what Section 735 of H.R. 933 states is that if a plant is determined to be a biological pest and is therefore brought under regulation and restrictions which prevent it from being planted or transported within the U.S., the Secretary of Agriculture shall immediately grant a temporary, permanent, or deregulation to any farmer, farm operator, or producer that requests it, regardless of what any other laws or courts may order. Now, the word genetically modified organism isn't mentioned here, and that's part of the skillful way that this was designed to slip through. Only someone who knows that by default genetically modified organisms are considered biological pests until they've been approved by the Department of Agriculture, and that they are reclassified as pests if shown unsafe, would understand the implications here. To distill this down to one sentence, if a farmer wants to grow a genetically modified plant that's been outlawed because it's been found to be harmful to the environment or human health, all they need to do is contact the Secretary of Agriculture, and they will be immediately issued a permit to cultivate these plants. Essentially, it makes it impossible to stop a genetically modified plant from being used in the United States, regardless of any laws or rulings that are made to outlaw them.